9, 12, 10, 28, 2, 23.
This is Deep State Radio.
Hello, loyal listeners, and welcome to another episode of We're All Gonna Die Radio. I'm your host, lonely soul host, John Wolfstall, still missing my former partner in crime, Heather Williams. Hi, Heather, wherever you are, working hard. I'm particularly excited about today's episode for a number of reasons. The main is that we get to talk with one of my colleagues at the Federation of American Scientists. Eliana Johns is a senior research associate. She's been with the program just over a year. She's one of the brilliant young minds at FAS that are really looking to shape the way American security is handled and informed. And we're thrilled that she was able to join us today. Hi, Eliana.
Hi, great to see you.
I know we don't see each other. We don't see each other much during the week because we're both really busy and we're still in this weird, like, some days we're in the office, some days we're not in the office. For those of you working, you understand this dilemma. But we have a great team at FAS. And when I joined about a year ago, getting to meet Eliana really made me even more excited about being there because of the things that this next generation is able to do that when I was coming into the field back in the were unimaginable. Right. We knew there were satellites, but we didn't know exactly what they did, or yes, they took some pictures, but maybe, they were better than we thought. Now the world has really changed in a way that people like Eliana not only understand, but can use. And to that point, in fact, Eliana posted a piece this week. Eliana, why don't you lay down what you did this week and what's interesting about it?
Yeah, happy to. This is honestly one of the best parts of the job where a lot of what our work revolves around is making either discoveries or pulling pieces together about the state of nuclear arsenals and what the status and trends are looking like. So of course we have to do a lot of this writing and research, but really when we get the opportunity to do these geolocation projects, it's really so much fun. It's a really exciting part of the work that we get to do here. So basically what happened, it was a few weeks ago, but on September 25th, China test launched an ICBM, and I remember waking up that morning, going about my morning and then reading the news as you skim all the news sources and Twitter and everything. And I saw this reporting. I immediately sent it to our work chat and I was like, guys, we have to find this. Are you kidding me? This is amazing.
So I'm going to interrupt you for a second, Ellie, because you can hear in her voice how excited she was that China had launched an ICBM. And her immediate thought was, this is great. We have to find this, right? I'm not sure that's exactly what U.S. policymakers thought, but it shows you where the instinct of this project is and where the value is. So sorry for interrupting, Ellie.
No, absolutely. And even the fact that I could do this at this job, I think is so special, and being able to reach out to all my colleagues and say, you guys, let's geek out over this. So definitely a great place to work in for people like us. But so that morning, it was just so crazy seeing this for the first time. And then, of course, we got very little information from the PLA when they announced that this launch had happened. They said that it was like a routine training operation. They didn't really give us much more information, but I think this is a really cool case of where a lot of these kind of open source analysts have come together and collaborated and build it off each other to pull these pieces together.
So, Ellie, before you get into the real geekery, why was this test launch so interesting? Like, what was different about it, and what sort of made it grab news? Because, China tests short-range missiles all the time. It does test ICBMs on a pretty regular basis. So what was new about this?
Yeah, so there were a couple of things that were pretty unusual about this this test launch. So once we started putting pieces together about where it came from, we realized that it was from Hainan Island, which is this is unusual for a couple of reasons. So first of all, Hainan Island is a place where they have the Longpole Naval Yard, but there are no permanently deployed ICBMs there. So that's unique, number one. And the second thing is that this is the first time that China had tested an ICBM and targeted the Pacific in, I think it was 44 years, so over 4 decades. And this was the first time that they had done this was in the 1980 when they tested their first ICBM, the DF5. So this was really a unique situation because of the location and the fact that they were testing it into the Pacific. And there's a few practical kind of reasons for this that I can get into as well.
Yeah, why? I mean, where do they normally test missiles, and why would they do it differently this time?
Yeah, so usually China will test missiles in a very high apogee within its borders, and you have to do that if you have limited space, pretty much. But they launching it in a depressed trajectory in this way actually allows it to reach its maximum range, which allows you to get a much more realistic test of the system. So this is really important, and the U.S. does this all the time to get a good idea of its system's capabilities and to test its functions, etc. And so you can imagine that China decided to launch this missile from Hainan because it allows it to fly at its full range without dropping missile stages on the ground, and then also it allows you don't have to overfly other countries, which is a really key point here as well. And so these are kind of like really technical, practical reasons why you would want to choose this kind of location. So looking at it from that perspective, while it is unusual, it does make a little bit of sense.
Right. Okay, so they don't have missiles in Hainan Island, but they move this missile there, and they usually test really high up in China. This time they decided to shoot in the Pacific. So this really grabbed the news, right? I mean, we'll talk in a minute about like China and why there's so much attention on it. But, in the midst of the war in Ukraine, in the midst of the war in Gaza, like this grabbed the headline for all of like 8 hours. So, okay, the missile gets launched. It hits the headlines. And then you're like, okay, where was this launched from? So talk us through like, one, why, and two, how.
Yeah. Okay, this is the fun part. So
I work with nothing but geeks, by the way. It's a good thing, but they know they're geeks and they enjoy it. They embrace the inner geek.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'll start by saying that geolocating things like this can be important because it could give you information about the reasoning behind the launch, about how they're conducting these launches, but also collecting this data is important for when you're looking at these developments over a long period of time. So getting as much information as you can, especially from a country like China where we really have limited access, is important just for general research purposes. So basically what happened is on the day that they conducted this launch and the PLA announced it, we didn't have a lot of information until the PLA ended up releasing a photo of the launch, which is really just really great for us. And from this, so China has a few different kinds of ICBMs, but we could narrow it down to either the DF-41 or the DF-31A or AG originally, because those are the road mobile variants of their ICBMs. And so from this image, you could see that there was actually the DF-31AG. It has this, it's pretty much the DF-31A missile, we think, but the launcher itself is more maneuverable, and it requires less support pretty much. So you can see that from the image itself, which is really great for just understanding what it is that they launched. And this is important just to see what kinds of priority, like systems they're prioritizing and things like that. So basically we had this image, and this was the first real clue that we got, because you could see, the clouds in the background, you could see vegetation, and you can see at the bottom right of the image, there's a small body of water, which gives you at least a little bit of a hint as to when you're looking on satellite imagery to sort of verify or increase your confidence on where this launch may have occurred from.
So just to be clear, they released one photo, right?
Publicly, like officially, yes, they released.
Okay. They released one photo, and it's a missile with a launcher with a whole bunch of tires. It looks like some souped up, like Lego construction. From that, you figure out what missile it is, and by looking at the clouds and the vegetation, and is there a road in it? Like it's on a road, or is it off road?
If you zoom in really closely, it looks like it could be on some kind of road, and it would make sense to launch from a road because it's a harder surface. So that it makes sense. But what we ended up finding is more images that actual local people were posting on social media. So there was one image that started to surface that was actually a picture of the launcher as it was reportedly driving to its launch position, which is also just a gem because the photo captures the road and the markings on the road were actually really unique. So I think this photo came out the day after the launch, and immediately I was like, oh, I can find that because of these like really particular road markings. And you could see also the vegetation in this image, stuff like that. So as I was embarking on that geolocation journey, trying to first find this more identifiable picture, an analyst actually reached out to us. Issa Midori, I believe is how you pronounce their name, but Issa reached out to us and said that think that they found at least a general area where this launch may have occurred. So we started talking and collaborating and geeking out. And basically they had gone and found a bunch of videos and pictures that locals had posted online and took the angle of the sun, the cloud coverage, and geolocated those images to then kind of pinpoint an area of interest. So we were all geeking about that, looking at the clouds and the angle of the sun, and basically came up with this area of interest. And at that point too, I geolocated the image of the launcher where maybe it was driving to its launch position, maybe it was before or after, but this was actually 2 kilometers away from this area of interest that we had pinpointed. And both of these points actually were within the boundary of this relatively new, within the past couple of years, this PLA training site. And so that kind of increases your confidence a little bit that this area is really, really a good guess for where this location probably occurred.
Right.
And we wanted to go with this area of interest, particularly because the picture the PLA posted was really the perspective and the distance at which the image was taken is really hard to completely confidently verifiably confirm that this was the exact angle and location of the launcher. So we went with an area just to be a little bit more cautious, but we're pretty excited about the way that we were able to use some of these really random tools and sources to be able to put everything together. So it was a really great project to work on.
And so what's fascinating to me is the ability to sort of pull these different threads when you're immersed in this world, right? And we saw this and some of the dangers of this during the first part of the military operation in Gaza with the shelling of the Palestinian hospital. And immediately people were online who, claimed to be very knowledgeable, very experienced geolocation geniuses saying, this is definitely an Israeli strike. And then you actually had people that know what they're doing who were able to take not just video of the strike and the impact, but actually corroborating information from video, from locals that were posting things online, knowing where, in fact, Hamas positions were, and saying, look, these are coming from established Hamas launch points. You're doing the same thing, but you're doing it in China. People, I assume just tourists or farmers or, locals are saying hey, that's a really cool giant green missile on my road. I'm going to take a picture and put it. Is this on WeChat or are they putting it on Twitter? Where are you finding this?
WeChat was where it first came up, but there were a couple images and videos out there. There was one from a banana farmer, we think. So
yeah. So, this is what's really fascinating to me is, 30, 40 years ago, governments had satellites. And they took pictures, and occasionally, like in the Cuban Missile Crisis, or in the case of North Korea in the 90s, they would release some of these photographs, and they weren't as good as we could get because actually U.S. satellites are pretty good, like they could read license plates from space. But there was a whole revolution in the 90s and the 2000s where commercial satellites got to be really good. Now, Eliana and Hans and Matt and the team at FAS, we have contracts with Maxar and these other satellite providers, Planet, that basically give us not government level capabilities, but capabilities that governments would have killed for 30 years ago, we can get really good resolution, and we combine it then with all these other sources. And from that, you can develop pretty good details about what's actually happening. Maybe not in real time, like this isn't a targeting, a database, but it's something that allows you to track and see the evolution of these systems, which to me, I'm a geek, in the sense that I play Dungeons and Dragons and can quote from Star Trek, but like this is real world geekery that, still sort of wows me. So, okay, you sort of pinpoint this area, on Highland Island to a PLA base. And then at what point do you say, like, this is the spot? Like, what is it that allows you to get that confidence after a period of time? And how long did that take?
Yeah. And to your point as well, I think this is, again, just a great example of how, commercial satellite imagery has become so accessible to people these days. And even just the evolution and spread of social media has opened so many doors for the open source world. And I think this is like a really great method and way for the public to engage in these issues, to be able to provide insights and information so that we can talk about these kinds of problems and why they're important. So yeah, to your point, I completely agree that it's fascinating that we can do these kinds of things. And I think it's only going to get, more important from here as technology continues to evolve. And so one of the things too is as you get with these more increased tools and access to these kinds of things, you have a lot of people who then are becoming experts in the field of open source analysis and research. So it was actually really exciting for me to be able to work on this project with another analyst. And this is one of the things that helped increase confidence as we were kind of trying to put these pieces together, is when after we were both kind of figuring out that this location might be of relevance, we could then work off of each other and ask each other questions and discuss methodologies to try and just make sure that we're both kind of on the right track. So there were a few moments where I thought maybe it could be from this angle or from this certain perspective, but I think when we finally were able to come together and really chat through, the vegetation is leaning this way, which after the typhoon in early September, it probably means that it was coming from the east. And the cloud coverage in this one picture seems to be from, maybe several hours before. So being able to discuss all those things together is what really made me feel good about our area of interest. And
do you actually like name the blades of grass? Like, do you, how close up and personal do you get with this stuff?
You won't believe it, but we were looking at individual bushes in the pictures. We ended up deciding that probably wasn't enough to go on. And that's, again, why we had the area of interest, because really we were looking at bushes here and maybe this bush was here, maybe this lump of grass could be this one on the satellite imagery. So usually, and to your point again, like when you do open source investigations, it's a responsibility because you're putting out really important news or really important information that could be useful to people. And there's a responsibility to make sure that your research is as accurate as possible, and you're not making assumptions as like you're making calculated assumptions about things. You're not just kind of throwing out any possibility.
I think it's the difference between expertise and the technical term, which is a swag. Super wild ass guess, right? And
Yeah.
no, this is part of the challenge. So social media is a boon, obviously, right? You're able to do things that previously we only imagined. But it's also, there's this pressure to be first, right? There's the hot take, which we all know the value of hot takes is generally pretty low. How long did it take you from like waking up and being excited about a missile launch to really knowing where this exactly was from?
Yeah, well, that's exactly right too. The first thing, whenever I'm talking about how to do open source investigations, the first thing I always say is don't rush. As you said, there's so much pressure to be first, but I definitely set aside several days to focus on this project. But if you immediately rush into, I found it here and now I have to publish it, it leaves a lot of room for error. And there's nothing wrong with posting something and then later on coming back and saying this was incorrect, I miscalculated, we have new information now. But I think not rushing is a really key point of doing this work. So at first it took me a couple of days really to find this, to find the image of the launcher driving to possibly its launch position. And part of this was, and this is kind of a downfall of working in the open source, part of this was we didn't have updated satellite imagery that was at a that was clear enough, I guess, and high enough resolution for us to really see the road markings. So finally, though, I was able to use Planet. So shout out to Planet. I was able to find just a strip of this road in high enough resolution to see this. So that took several days, and then the process of collaborating with this other analyst, Isa, took several days because we really wanted to be sure after we were talking back and forth over email. And then I wanted to make sure that I could really visualize and demonstrate these processes through graphics. And so I had to create these graphics. And then I think that really took the longest amount of time because at that point we had a lot of the information and understanding about the missile itself and, potential reasons why they launched it from Hainan Island. So really just pulling together all these pieces and being absolutely sure that we could with at least relative confidence point to this area of interest. We really wanted to be thorough with this work. And so that just kind of took a lot of back and forth. So that was definitely a few days there.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you one last question, then we're going to take a brief break, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what this all means, particularly in this environment where a lot of people are talking about China. Oh, by the way, they're talking about China in part because of the work FAS did to uncover their silos and publicly identify this stuff. But and be honest here, okay? So you have to be, not that you're never dishonest. There's somebody in the U.S. government who gets to look at the really good satellite stuff that detects like missile launch plumes. So we have special satellites, SIBRs, which is used in early warning. They knew exactly where this missile was from because they could see. Like, don't you really wish you could just pick up the phone and call Joe, satellite guy at NGA, and be like, "Hey, this is the spot." And the serious question is, do you interact with these people? Like, do you have relationships with people on the inside? Not to say, "Hey, give me the classified good stuff," but so you can practice your art because this really is sort of it's not just a science. There's an art to it.
Yeah. So personally, I don't have relationships with people who do this kind of stuff.
They're all listening, by the way. We're big inside the intelligence community, so they're going to reach out to you, I'm sure.
Oh no, my goodness. Well, I have to say though, sometimes I do wish I had the fun tools that the government has and all the access and the secrets, but where's the fun in that? You're not spending 8 hours of your workday looking at roads in Hainan Island, and what are you doing?
They get it in 10 seconds. They know exactly where it is, and all they do is decide whether or not it's targeted at the United States in 2 minutes or less.
Exactly. Plus, they were notified beforehand too, so it was a great surprise waking up on the 25th.
So, if you work inside the intelligence community and you want to help the outside world do it better, please reach out. We're at fas.org, and we're always ready to take your call.